This episode contains descriptions of violence and death. We advise listener discretion.
Kind of just makes the hair on your neck stand up. It just seemed like there was an evil hovering over the house. Might be imagination, but it was there. It was real. You could feel it.
From neighbors to officers and prosecutors, people connected to this case often return to the same word: evil. It's a word that shuts down conversation and at the same time draws people in. The house where the Bever family lived became a kind of morbid landmark, a site where people visited, part curiosity, part disbelief.
It sort of bothers you for people to just drive by constantly and stop and look.
The big white house with black trim sat empty for nearly 2 years, weighed down by a history the neighborhood hadn't been able to move past. The question of what to do with it was eventually answered through a fundraising campaign. More than $50,000 was raised to buy the home with the intent to tear it down. But before that could happen, it went up in flames.
Despite a major fire at the Bever family home, it is still standing here in the Indian Springs area of far southern Broken Arrow. The effort to continue to remove this scar from the neighborhood is continuing. The terrible crimes will require a lot of healing.
The new development brought the attention back to Magnolia Court and to people like Maggie Jacobson. She's the neighbor who seemed to know April Bever the most.
When it went up in flames, it was kind of brought back the same kind of feelings.
What didn't burn was later bulldozed.
A reminder, the Bever family murders now gone. Tenelli's Charles Ely was there when their house was torn down this morning, and he joins us live from the newsroom with a look at what that means for this community. Charles?
The site of the most savage murders in Oklahoma history will soon become a memorial garden. But to get there, you have to raise a little dust.
The lot didn't stay empty for long. Today, it's home to a memorial garden created to remember the victims and to honor the first responders whose lives were forever changed by that call. By the very next day, officers were already acknowledging the toll that scene would take.
I'm joined by Broken Arrow Police Department's Corporal Calhoun. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you all doing after witnessing such a scene inside?
Well, obviously, anytime you have a situation like this where you not only have, a homicide, but when you actually have 5, and then you add that on top of that is you've got 3 juveniles, with the youngest one being as young as 5 years old. Very traumatic. And again, as officers, when we respond, training comes into effect where you just basically do your job. But it's when you have the downtime where that's really going to start affecting the officers and the first responders, where those sights and smells are going to come back, and it's very traumatic.
The house could be torn down, but what happened inside didn't disappear along with it. And more than a decade later, people are still trying to understand how this could happen. I asked Captain Brandon Tiener and Detective Eric Bentz why they believe this case has not faded from public memory.
When's the last time you heard 2 teenagers murdered their entire family in a suburban city with an extremely low crime rate? I think it's just different.
I kind of feel like one of the big factors in this case having so much attention is that the general public, when something like this happens, the first thing they want to know is why. There's usually a reason for most crimes that are committed. And so people try to fill in that blank, I feel like. So they want to just go in, because it's not just publicized, okay, we figured out exactly why they did it. And so they go and maybe try to learn a little bit more about the case and go down the rabbit hole and watch whatever media is out there about it, and then come to their own conclusions. And there's usually not a conclusion in this case for most people.
The search for why becomes its own story. It's a search I've been on for nearly 6 months. In the first episode, I mentioned that I had questions. What leads someone to turn on the people closest to them, the ones who raised them, sheltered them, loved them? Most of us spend our lives shaped by those bonds. When a child kills their parents, it collides with almost everything we believe about family. The instinct is to search for an explanation: mental illness, addiction, abuse, a momentary break. Anything that allows us to believe that this was not deliberate. Because if it was, we're forced to confront a much harder question. And that question takes on a different weight when the violence doesn't stop with parents, but reaches younger siblings. Why did you start at home?
I was already insane, but I snapped a little bit more, if that makes sense.
You'll hear Robert finish that thought later in this episode. 10 years after the murders, I found myself in the unusual position of being the very first journalist to sit down with Robert Bever. To my knowledge, aside from his attorneys, I'm the only person who's ever visited him. It was the first time he's spoken on camera to a journalist since that night. I thought that kind of rare access might lead to answers. But it also carries a responsibility to ask difficult questions and to not look away from the responses, uncomfortable as they may be. Instead, it revealed something else, why the question itself never really goes away. I'm Brenna Rose, and this is Massacre on Magnolia Court, Episode 7. Why? The Unanswered Question.
Why did he want to do it?
Kill people?
Yeah.
Well, mainly two reasons, I think. It's, because he just, says he hates everyone. He thinks society is pointless, and so he wanted to kill people.
Yeah,
and also he wanted to, beat the kill, amount of other famous people like Columbine and James Egan Holmes.
These police interviews with Michael and Robert Bever have been watched and rewatched, searched for meaning.
So do you think they all deserve to die?
My family, yes. They were very bad people. They were bane of society. They made a system.
There was no long manhunt. The brothers were in custody within an hour, and they talked. The facts came quickly. Understanding never has.
I haven't found out anything as far as a motive at this point. I don't even know if there actually is one, if there can be for something like this.
For Detective Bentz, the explanation comes down to that single word.
They weren't insane. They weren't abused. They weren't tortured. They weren't part of some cult or, terrorist organization. They were just pure evil. And I looked in their eyes and saw it. And so that's my why they did it. And that's my explanation. And I didn't ever find any other reason besides that.
I wanted to know how Robert responds when he hears himself described that way. What do you think of that assessment?
That's probably the best way a person can look at it without trying to understand me. I'm fine with that. And I can say that what I did was evil, but I'm not evil. When I assault staff in here and nobody asks me why I did it, I stopped trying to explain it because nobody cares. I just shouldn't have done it. That's a small example of evil, is I think that it's evil to try to justify what I did. And I still stand firm on believing that I have to take responsibility for what I did. And there are people out in the world who deserve the peace of mind of hating me and calling me evil.
For years, people have searched for a reason that makes this crime make sense. Over the months we corresponded, Robert described what he says motivated him. It was the very first time he put a name to it. In one message, he described the motivation as terrorism and a desire to experience combat as a prelude to suicide. And versions of that emerged when I interviewed him, something we touched on in episode 3.
You said you're gonna go on a killing spree. What was your end game?
Shootout with the police. I wanted to, I pictured myself doing the most, it still sounds impressive for some reason, doesn't it? Full body armor, weapons, ammunition, shooting at cars, they blow up or something, I get hit a couple times, I go down, I take myself out or something.
was a fantasy of combat, not real military service, which he once told detectives in 2015 that he had considered.
I wanted to join the Marines for a while, but my parents were like, you want to throw your life away?
Instead, it became a stylized version of combat, shaped by video games, movies, and online forums.
Have you ever played Grand Theft Auto? If you get 5 stars as a criminal, every special forces and police in the game surround you, and if you can manage to hold on for a while, you get experience points for it.
That final scene that Robert envisioned never played out. When I spoke with District Attorney Steve Kunzweiler, I asked him how he interpreted Robert's explanation of motive.
That sounds to me as though he's trying to rationalize in a modern context what's going on. So if he has access to the internet in prison, if he has access to media, I'm sure he's starting to look and dive into things and come up with a reason other than a very immature reaction to a frustration.
Prosecutors don't always need to explain why to secure a conviction, and you'll remember that Robert took a plea deal. But I wanted to know whether a motive had ever emerged.
I think there was some level of resentment festering and eating at him, and of course he's living in a room with Michael. I think they got obsessed with people who had committed other instances of mass murder or serial killing type events, and so they became fixated on those storylines. I think they fashioned themselves somewhat as going down in the history as somebody famous as a result of not just killing their family. I think that was the precursor to going on some kind of a killing spree. That seemed to be their motivation. At the end, I think they really wanted to be famous serial killers. That was the best description I could gather from their interviews.
It's an interpretation shaped by decades in a courtroom. Robert offers his own. It comes at a distance and is framed as theory.
The things that make a mass murderer in general, which is something that I had a problem with, is, well, when you have 2 people doing it at the same time, you've got like the leader and the follower who juices them up to keep them going. One's a psychopath, one's depressed, just like Columbine. And when you get 2 maladjusted young men together talking about abuse that they've gone through, how much they hate the world, how much they're suffering, and they don't know what to do with themselves, it polarizes to a point that they start talking about murder. That's just how guys are. It's very macho, it's very testosterone filled. And in general, I just feel like mass murderers they feel emasculated, sexually frustrated, slighted, demeaned by people or society. They can't get ahead even though they think they're smarter than everyone else.
He never names himself, but the parallels are hard to ignore.
Do you have remorse?
I have as much remorse as I'm capable of feeling. I had a severe brain injury when I was 6 years old that I think made me a psychopath.
His answer defines the limits of what he says he can feel and leans on a moment that can't be independently verified. I did listen for signs of remorse. Robert's tone rarely shifts, but there was one moment when it did, when he talked about his brother Daniel. You'll remember he was the one who called 911.
My brother's attacking my family.
Your dad is attacking your family?
No, my brother. He has an idea stealing me.
Do they?
Before you hear what Robert says next, I do want to warn you. This was one of the hardest moments of the interview for me to sit through. I did consider not including it, but I chose to leave it in part because it's very telling. He talks about hoping his brother Daniel would become a big kid, a member of a council his older siblings had formed. We pick it up where he explains why Daniel never did.
Because he called the police, and so I tracked him down and killed him.
If he hadn't have called the police, would you have killed him?
No. that's hard to say, but he had every right to live. He was begging me. That was the only part of that night I'm going to talk about, because I think about it every day. If I'm going to hell because of what I did to him, I understand. He was begging me. He said, "I'm with you. I'll do whatever you want." And I still started staring at him. He was a genius. He liked all the things I did. He liked Star Wars. He liked Legos. Killing Daniel is the unforgivable sin.
That's the first time that Robert offers anything personal about any of his siblings. And it comes as he's describing his 12-year-old brother's final moments. He calls killing Daniel the unforgivable sin. But there were others: his siblings, Christopher and Victoria, and his parents. Earlier I mentioned that we would come back to Robert's explanation of where this began. After everything we've heard about motive, remorse, and the moment Daniel called for help, none of that answers the first choice that was made.
Why did you start at home?
I was already insane, but I snapped a little bit more, if that makes sense. I was waiting on my ammunition to arrive the very next day. I was gonna go get my guns, and Michael and I were gonna be gonzo. We were gonna go across the country shooting people. Like, ha ha ha, isn't America insane? What are you gonna do about it? I had been writing in my journal plans for killing them. Michael helped me with that a little bit. And I kept coming up with these different plans, but mainly that was me coping with the facts that I was seeing things emerging that I hadn't seen in years, like dysfunctional and beyond. And it was really starting to bother me.
Like in your home?
Yes. And so in my mind, it was kind of like this very terribly selfish, horrible thing where I was thinking that I could wipe the slate with them. I'd just take them all out and they wouldn't live to see what I was about to do next.
As he was talking, his focus broke briefly when a light in the room started flashing. That explanation leaves a lot unresolved. When I first started looking into this case, I was warned that not every question has an answer. I understand that differently now, and it's something that forensic psychopathologist David McLeod helped me put into context.
To whatever degree will you feel comfortable to say it socially or not, there is always a fascination with the macabre. And part of that is dealing with our own fear, our own mortality, wanting to understand and be able to predict and prevent. Psychologically, we'll pay attention to true crime. There's the other layer with stories like this, because when you're trying to understand the behavior of someone who has a significant personality disorder or other type of potential diagnosis, like that could have psychotic symptoms to it, you will not be able to rationally explain all of their behavior. But we want to be able to rationally explain people's behavior.
Because understanding why people do what they do helps us feel safer. I also asked David to review the interview and analyze what could be taken from Robert's words and behavior.
There are going to be kernels or nuggets of truth throughout this whole interview. And even whether he realizes it or not.
And that's not the same as the full truth. I couldn't shake the dozens of Facebook accounts that Robert told me he'd created. It made me wonder, who was I actually sitting across from?
I wouldn't be shocked with that type of compulsive behavior that he demonstrated in the interview, that he would heavily study these words and concepts online and create a character that he thinks people want to hear about. We're kind of all here to be manipulated by him. That matches the type of personality that would do something like this. His is interesting in that, like, He wants to be much stronger than he is, and he knows that he's not, at least subconsciously. So a lot of this is his justification to feel bigger. His end game was always to try to feel power over his environment. Whatever the events of his early childhood, mixed with, most likely, the chemical realities of his brain. Like, some people are born with these traits. Some people develop them over experiences. Epigenetically, in the spaces that I've worked in and researched over the years, it's almost always a combination of the two.
Since the Bever murders, Broken Arrow has seen other cases of family violence, but none have unfolded in quite the same way. Some of the same officers would go on to work those cases.
I don't think it has anything to do with the Bever case. I think it's just society or growth or who knows what. There's just evil out there. There's crazy people out there.
When they think of this one now, they don't necessarily focus on the crime. They focus on the people who survived it.
I'm proud to have been involved in this case. I'm proud of the people that I got to work with. Everybody that showed up that night and throughout the trial, I'm proud to be associated with them. And I'm incredibly proud of the survivors.
Today, the elder sister is in her early 20s. Her younger sister is entering into her teenage years. Their adoptive mother submitted a victim impact statement during Michael's trial about what the girls would carry forward, not just what they survived, but what healing would require over a lifetime. As I've worked on this project, I've spent a lot of time thinking about the conclusions that they've reached or whether this even occupies space in their daily lives at all. Through an attorney, I reached out to Crystal and her adoptive mother. They declined to do an interview. Steve Kunzweiler says he speaks to their adopted mother from time to time.
It's described to me just kind of almost a miracle that you can have a terrible situation for them to experience, and then to have probably the best person on the planet to take over and shepherd these two young girls and young woman now to a point where they have a life of their own and they can live independently, and nobody really knows who they are. And I think they know who they are, but they're able to kind of compartmentalize it in a way that allows them to live the dreams anybody else would want, meet friends, go to school, date. The hope I have is to know that through all this evil, there is a light that just can't be extinguished.
I want to go back to that childhood moment you heard in the last episode, the one that Robert says stayed with him.
I was mad at my mom, so I got a thumbtack and I put it in the middle of the floor in the kitchen for her to step on. I forgot about it and I stepped on it. And that's when I started believing in God and karma.
Years later, sitting across from Robert in prison, I noticed a scar nearly the width of his neck. Before I could ask about it, someone else in the room during the interview did.
There's not much of a story there. Somebody who had actually warned me repeatedly over the years that I was there that somebody might try to kill me just to be able to say they were the guy that killed me.
You may remember how this crime started, the first act that set everything into motion, when Robert attacked his sister and cut her throat.
That same guy came up behind me while I was handcuffed to a table getting a haircut and slit my throat with a razor blade.